Alrighty, so we're going to be learning about constructed response questions, how you can respond to these questions in a way that's going to get you a perfect grade every time. I've taught constructed response in the past where you've done everything from color coding to power writing numbers to all these weird acronyms. The truth is, it's a lot simpler than that. So I'm hoping to take all the confusion out, and you can use this approach anytime you have to answer any constructed response question, pretty much ever. So why should you care? Why are we doing this? Well, constructed response questions are on standardized tests, tests for class, homework assignments, and more. Basically, you can't get away from them. You're going to read a text, and the teacher's going to ask you a question, and then you have to write out your answer. That's just something that's going to be everywhere now, especially with this new teacher thing called the Common Core. It's just going to happen. But what's really more important, even if you're not the kind of person that's really worried about like doing it because your teacher told you or for your grades, is because these are the pieces of any essay. If you're not writing a narrative, knowing how to write the pieces that I'm about to teach you can help you with pretty much any kind of persuasive or expository writing you're going to do for the rest of your life. Learning these skills will help you complete any expository or persuasive writing. And that includes everything from writing a letter to be admitted into college, writing a cover letter for a resume, even, writing a dissertation someday. So that's what good writing is. It's just knowing what these pieces are. And there's a cat, because why not? Right, so what are the steps? Well, when you are first given a test, the first thing you need to do is read it, write it, check it. So just like that. Read it, write it, check it. That's all you really need to remember. And we'll go into each one of the steps. So with writing it, I have some other parts there that we'll talk about. We've got thesis, body, and conclusion. And we'll go over all that, okay? Here we go. Step one, read it. So you have your test in front of you. There's a question, there's some lines. You know you're going to have to write something. So what do? The first thing you need to do is actually read the question. You'd be surprised how many people will just read the text first, or they'll try to answer the question with only reading chunks of it. Don't do that. Read the question. Don't skim it. Underline key words, especially verbs. So are you supposed to write? You're supposed to analyze. You're supposed to locate evidence. Look for all those key phrases. Hopefully your teacher went over a lot of those academic test-taking verbs with you, and you have an idea of what those words mean, what your brain should be doing when you see those words. Also look for any big class words. So in my case, as a communication arts teacher, if you see analyze theme, okay, well, I would underline the word theme, because you're going to have to keep that in the back of your head as you're getting ready to write. Next thing you need to do, read the text itself. Keep in mind what the question is asking. If allowed, make marks on parts of the text you want to reference in the answer. So after you've read the question, you know what's going to be expected, read the entire text. So if it's a poem, read the poem. If it's an article, read the article. And then if you're allowed, a lot of tests will let you do this, make little marks like, oh, I know this is going to be helpful, help me prove my point, this is going to be helpful, so that way you don't have to go back when it's time for you to write. All right, so we just finished reading it, right? We read the question, we read the text, now what? Well, now we write it. And when we write our constructed response, we can break it down into three basic parts. And again, this isn't anything that's different from the words you've heard before. Thesis, body, conclusion. That's it. Just thinking about it in those terms. Thesis, body, conclusion. So the thesis is one sentence that answers the question provided in the prompt. Don't try to come up with it out of your own head. Use the words that the question is giving to you. Use the words in the question to write that thesis. The body needs to be as long as required. So if it says 2 paragraphs, yeah, you need to write 2 paragraphs. It says 3 paragraphs, you need to write 3 paragraphs. All you need to be able to do in the body is prove what you say in your thesis. So the thesis answers the question in one sentence. And in the body, you prove why you're right. And in the body, you need to prove it, quote it. Prove it in your own words, pulling as much of the stuff from the text as possible, and then quote that text. So there's a song that will help you remember how to quote appropriately, and I'll sing it in a second when we actually start writing the example. And then conclusion. At the very end, wrap it up with a conclusion. You can do this one of two ways. You can either provide some kind of closing thought or opinion, but not all teachers like that. Maybe just restating the thesis would be another way to do it. And then finally, just don't forget those transition words. So things like first, next, then, finally, in conclusion. all that good stuff. Helps your reader keep track of your ideas as you go. Step 3, check it. So now that you've written the whole thing, go back and read that question one more time. You'd be surprised how when people are testing and they get a little freaked out, the things that they might forget to do. Check off or mark out all parts of the question you answered. If you forgot a part, add to your response. Make sure you did everything you're supposed to do. All right, so let's go ahead and go through an example together. Just talking about it isn't the same as actually writing something, right? So let's go ahead and write something together. We're going to read the poem Dear Basketball by Kobe Bryant. Why and how does Kobe use personification in this poem? Answer using at least 2 paragraphs and 2 quotes from the text. So we're going to go ahead and open up this poem. This was the poem that he wrote when he announced his retirement. The poem is called Dear Basketball. He published it November 29th, 2015. I'll go ahead and read it. If you don't want to hear me read it, you can just skip past this part and read it yourself. It's very beautiful. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. All right, so, Dear Basketball. From the moment I started rolling my dad's tube socks and shooting imaginary game-winning shots in the great Western form, I knew one thing was real. I fell in love with you. A love so deep I gave you my all, from my mind and body to my spirit and soul. As a 6-year-old boy deeply in love with you, I never saw the end of the tunnel. I only saw myself running out of one. And so I ran. I ran up and down every court and every loose ball for you, after every loose ball for you. You asked for my hustle, I gave you my heart, because it came with so much more. I played through the sweat and hurt, not because challenge called me, but because you called me. I did everything for you, because that's what you do when someone makes you feel as alive as you've made me feel. You gave a 6-year-old boy his Laker dream, and I'll always love you for it. But I can't love you obsessively for much longer. This season is all I have left to give. My heart can take the pounding, but my mind can handle the grind, but my body knows it's time to say goodbye. And that's okay. I'm ready to let you go. I want you to know now, so we can both savor every moment we have left together, the good and the bad. We've given each other all that we have. And we both know now, no matter what I do next, I'll always be that kid with the rolled up socks, garbage can in the corner, 5 seconds on the clock, ball in my hands. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Love you always, Kobe. Okay. So we've read our text. We know our question. Let's go ahead and write this thing a little bit. Give me just a second while I pull up a new blank document here. Now, obviously, you'll be writing this by hand, but I'm just going to go ahead and type it so everybody can see it. We want to make sure that we're looking at our text a lot and our question. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that question again just to make sure that I get the exact words correctly. So it is, why and how does Kobe use personification in this poem? So I know I need to be talking about personification. So I want to use the words that are in the question. So I know I want to say the word personification. So I'm going to say, Kobe uses personification in this poem by expressing his love for the game through comparing basketball to a person. So I'm doing a couple of different things here, right? First of all, I explain the purpose of personification. I also let my teacher know I know what personification means. Personification is when you're comparing something to a person. Kobe's talking about basketball like it's his love, right? Like it's his person. So I'm using that in my thesis. Remember, the first sentence where you answer the question is called the thesis. Okay? Now I need to prove it. I need to prove that I'm right. I'm going to prove it by talking about my text. Let me see how long this is supposed to be. Let me see how long my answer is supposed to be. I need 2 paragraphs and 2 quotes from the text. So I'm going to go ahead and go in my poem, and I'm going to find some moments where he's using personification. So right here, here's a great one. I knew one thing was real. I fell in love with you. Did he literally fall in love with his basketball? No. He's using that to talk about how much he loves the game. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in my own words. Kobe begins the poem by telling about how he fell in love with basketball during his childhood. Okay, so I just said it, right? I'm proving why I'm right. I'm proving it. So I wrote my thesis, now I prove it. Prove it. I'm saying what happened in the poem. Now I need to quote it. Just saying it isn't enough. We need to actually quote that text to show that it's actually in there. So I'm going to go ahead and say the text states as kind of a transition. Notice I'm using a transition phrase here to say that, okay guys, now I'm going to actually tell you some words from the poem. So the text states, I knew one thing was real, I fell in love with you. I knew one thing was real, I fell in love with you. And I'm going to do something really fancy here. I'm going to say which lines I pulled that from. So that's line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's line 7 and 8. So when you're doing paragraphs, you can put paragraphs. When you're doing pages, you can put pages. But in poetry, usually you're going to do lines or even stanzas. But this one isn't that long. So we're just going to go ahead and do lines 7 and 8. This shows how much of himself Kobe gave to the game. Another reason we know Kobe wanted to express his love for the game is through his, now we're going to go back, I think he described here he's describing how much he gave away to the game, right? Like how he sacrificed so much of himself through his sacrifices. Sorry about the typo. Another reason we know Kobe wanted to express his love for the game is through his sacrifices. Another way Kobe, so I'm going to actually shorten the sentence up a little bit. I'm revising as I go, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and pause it for just a second while I finish writing this, and then we'll look at it together, okay? So I'm going to pause it right now. And I'm going to type a bunch, and then so that way you don't have to watch me type. Alrighty, so with the magic of pause, we've gone ahead and finished up this constructed response so you can see the example from beginning to end. In bright green up here, we've got the thesis, which is answering the question. Kobe uses personification in this poem by expressing his love for the game through comparing basketball to a person. Here we have the first major reason that we're right. Remember, we prove it, quote it, prove it, quote it. I prove it and quote it all in this light blue color here. Kobe begins the poem by telling about how he fell in love with basketball during his childhood. The text states, I knew one thing was real, I fell in love with you, lines 7 and 8. This shows how much of himself Kobe gave to the game. And in this darker blue color, we see another reason that we're right. This is another way that he uses personification. So we're still using the thesis, just answering the thesis, just giving another reason that we're right. So up here is one way we proved and quote it. Down here is another way we prove and quote it. Another reason Kobe expresses his love for the game is through his sacrifices. He explains how he gave everything to basketball because it gave him so much joy. The poem reads, because that's what you do when someone makes you feel as alive as you've made me feel, lines 27 to 29. He was ready to give his life to his true love, basketball. In conclusion, this is how Kobe uses a literary technique to illustrate his passion for the game. And what I did, guys, is I went ahead and I missed one, so let me get one more right there, is I underlined some of the transition words and phrases I used throughout, which again, the purpose of those is to help the reader keep track of the ideas as they go. Now, you're going to notice some weird stuff with how I quote it. The period is outside of the parentheses and it's not inside there. When you quote a text, you don't follow the same rules as any other time. I have a really stupid song to go along with it. So if you just want to look at it, remember it, go for it. But if you want to hear me, here we go. Ready? Quote the exact words in the text. Hug the page number in parentheses. The period goes outside because it doesn't have any friends. Quote the exact words in the text. I know it's stupid, but it's going to be stuck in your head. So look, quote the exact words in the text. Hug the page number in parentheses. The period goes outside because it doesn't have any friends. Quote the exact words in the text. Here, it's actually a line number, but it can be a line number, paragraph number, page number. It's all the same thing. It all works the same. Okay? All right, so two more really quick things. Since we just looked at the example together, the last two things, you guys probably knew this was coming. Really quick note slide. So if you need to pause and write down these notes, go ahead. And finally, the skill trick. 3 quick questions. Obviously, the only way you're going to know if you get this or not is by actually writing it yourself, but this is just going to assess your basic understanding. So guys, I hope you learned a little bit about how to write a really awesome constructed response, and as always, reach out to me or your teacher if you need more information.